Alright, in this next demonstration I'm going to show you how to add server C as an additional domain controller to server B, because in the previous demonstration we had already made server B a domain controller. In fact, our first domain controller in the forest. And as you notice, I have everything tabbed out as usual. My SCVMM, and then server A, B, C, core, and 7. And again, server B is a domain controller, and one of the things you got to watch out for is after you install Active Directory on server B, it now puts it in the network location of domain. Well, guess what? That network location has a firewall enabled by default. So what we're going to do is go in here to the Network and Sharing Center, and we're going to kill that firewall for now, because we want to allow server B to be able to server C to be able to contact server B and join the domain. If that firewall is still up and running, it's going to cause us some problems. So we're going to go into the Windows firewall area here, and notice again that domain network's firewall is on, so we'll do turn firewalls on or off, and go ahead and turn that firewall off for the domain network location. The other thing we want to do is, now that server B is our domain controller and DNS server, we want to point the rest of our machines over to server B for name resolution. So we're going to go ahead and go to server A real quick and go into the Network and Sharing Center so we can change those IP addresses to point to server B as our preferred DNS server. Let's go in here to my adapter settings and go to the properties, TCP/IP version 4, and we're going to change this again to 192.168.55.62, and we'll do the same thing for this adapter. Server B has already been configured automatically. Should have been. We'll double check it just to make sure. It's going to be itself. Probably just put the loopbacks in there. Yes, it did, which is fine. Same thing on this adapter. Loopbacks, again, that's fine. Self. And then on server C, again, we're going to go in here to the Network and Sharing Center and make sure that we're again pointing to server B, B.65. We might as well do it on core while we're here. Remember sconfig. So we're going to go into sconfig, and we're going to go to our network settings, 8 and 0 for the adapter. And we want to set the preferred DNS server, which is 2. And the DNS server again is going to be 192.168.55.65 for us. Enter. And we're not going to have an alternate. We're going to say 4 to return to the main menu, 13 to exit to the command line, back to where we were. Do a little CLS to clear out the screen, clean it up. Then let's finally go back over to Windows 7, the Network and Sharing Center, and go to our adapter settings, properties, and again change this to 192.168.55.65. Now everybody's pointing to server B as their primary DNS. So now we're ready to go to server C, and guess what command we're going to run again? DC promo down here, and hit enter to run that command. We're going to go through the same exact process as we did on server B, except we're going to make one minor change as to how it goes. Alright, once again we have the Active Directory installation wizard. We'll say next, next again. And look, this time we're going to say existing forest, because our Huglin.local forest already exists on server B. That was where we made that domain controller. And we're going to say add a domain controller to an existing domain. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to make server C an existing, or a new domain controller in an existing forest in an existing domain. Kind of work alongside server B for things like fault tolerance and load balancing for authentication in the domain. So we're going to say next. Type the name of the domain, and that's, again, that's going to be Huglin.local. It's not case sensitive, but I like to be that way. We're going to set the credentials to be administrator, and then our password. Say next. Found my domain. Again, the reason it found it was because I turned the firewall off on server B, which kicks on automatically once you're in the domain, and also I set the DNS up properly to point to server B, which is my DNS server that has the authority to resolve Hugoland.local names. It's going to ask me for the site. We're going to use the default first site name, which is the default there. The DNS configuration, it's asking us, do we want this to also be a DNS server? Yes, why not? We'll make this a DNS server and a global catalog server, which is the default. Yes, we do want to continue on with this. We're going to say yes. We're going to select the default locations for the database log files and sysvol. Say next. The DSRM password. Again, I explained what this is in a previous video in the earlier portion of the lab. And here's our summarization screen. Once again, let's make sure that everything is the way that we wanted it to be. Say next. And again, we can say reboot on completion. Again, notice what we're doing here is we're taking the original, so kind of a graphic of the original, maybe server B, transmitting information over to server C, so server C can also be that additional domain controller to provide authentications and for the purposes of fault tolerance and load balancing in case that server B goes down. Server C can still authenticate users in the domain.